Hey everybody, it's Robert Dunt from ArtTop10.com, and I'm very pleased today to have a lockdown interview with Suzanne Holtom. Hello, Suzanne.
Hi Rob, how are you doing?
Very good, thank you. So your studio looks actually rather wonderful behind you.
It is. I mean, it's amazing. I'm very lucky to have a studio very close, sort of 5 minutes walk. So I've been trying to integrate it into my one exercise routine a day, and spend rather a lot of time in here. And there's not many people in at the moment. There's a series of studios, but nice. No, it's great.
No, it looks really cool. So it looks so exciting what you've got in the background. There's like I think it looks like prints and drawings and books open and paintings on the go.
Yeah.
And
well, I brought a couple of things in because I knew obviously I was going to talk to you. Yeah. I've got a little sort of what I like to call a drawing atelier at home. Others might call it a shed in the garden. And I do a lot of drawings there, but I kind of bought a few bits in. I would normally have bits of pieces here, but I suppose not quite as many.
Okay, it's very cool.
So there's a print behind me as well. Yeah, I like to do bits of printmaking. Not too technical. I've just sort of set up an improvised print studio in my shed.
Oh, really?
Which is quite fun.
Oh, cool. Sounds really good, actually. Right, so go on. So tell me about the paintings. Have you got one behind you that's your current fave or on the go?
Yeah, I'll just stand to the side a little bit. I mean, this is one more recently that was done this year.
Okay.
This one's called Fiat and Tumble. Where to start? I kind of with more recent work, I suppose. I like reading stories, narratives in Ovid, which Metamorphosis in particular, because of what I do with change. I find it a good parallel with paintings, and so stories are in there, but it's also about the structure and the kind of plastic qualities of the work as well. It's had the formal qualities of the work as well. But this one is making particular reference to the story of Fiat, and I try to work in series a little bit. So there's a few paintings loosely along this theme, and another one this side is one that's underway, just sort of started really, and that's looking at another sort of theme of Venus imagery, particularly in Ovid as well.
Okay, very cool. So tell me the story of Fiat, because I just can't, off the top of my head, remember it.
No. I'm not. I mean, part of the reference is Ovid. Part of it is personal narratives as well. So I don't just make work about these stories, but it's kind of, I suppose the basic principle is about sort of the epic and the everyday sort of quotidian events, which are from my personal memory colliding. Okay. But with Fiat and with the story, he's a son of the sun god Phoebus, but nobody believes him because he's half. His father is Phoebus, but his mother is not a god, but nobody believes him. So he goes up to Phoebus and asks him to be recognized, and Phoebus says, yeah, whatever, what do you want? And he said, I really want to ride your chariot that sort of brings the sun up in the morning. And Phoebus goes, oh God, we should have asked me about anything else. Because you can't do that. And he said, no, you've made a promise and I've got to. So anyway, he ends up riding Phoebus's chariot and it all goes really wrong. And he starts scorching the earth with his reckless... So he's like a sort of a slightly reckless teenager let loose with some wheels and kind of starts destroying everything. And in the end, poor Fiat gets struck down. By Zeus to save the earth. It's this point where everything kind of it goes pear-shaped, is on the verge of collapse, and a moment of panic, I suppose.
I remember the story now. I remember the story. So so I was actually trying to look in my fancy bookshelf behind, see if I could actually find Metamorphosis.
Very fancy.
but so the picture is it of the earth being scorched? Is it of that moment, or is it? It's
about that moment. It's about a moment of collapse, because that's. I mean, I say that that was the reference. I've only talked about it because that's the title of it, but that's not how the paintings start in any way.
Okay.
I start the kind of imagery and the workings, and then I kind of connect it to stories. So actually, how they start off is from a very different place.
Okay.
And how this one started off, I was actually looking back at a Rubens painting, because I look at Baroque art quite a lot as well, and abstract expressionism.
Yeah.
And there was one painting called Decius Mus, which is like this battle scene of this horse taking off amongst all, and it's all going totally wrong. And so actually the motifs and the structure is started from there. And then as it developed, I kind of, it reminded me of an incident with my son in the park where he just kind of kept running and heading off into the distance. Yeah. And I was running with a pushchair, collapsing and trying to, and he didn't stop. So I thought about that, and then I was reading about Fiat as well. So you can kind of see that these sources come together in a strange way. And another thing that I look at a lot is there's Wile E. Coyote animations as well. So that sort of landscape's in there too. So there's a lot of strange things kind of all smashed together with it.
So it's quite interesting because you wouldn't expect the person looking at it to know the story about your son, or necessarily to catch the Ovid reference straight off, would you? So in a way, you're combining those sort of emotions and stories within you to almost communicate sort of abstract emotion, would you say?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I mean, I'm saying that because we're talking together, and I would never try and be mysterious about what I'm talking about or thinking to. I suppose I've titled it, so it's signalling something.
Yeah.
And like I say, what's really important to me is to explore this kind of huge space between epic things and ridiculous sort of calamitous everyday things. And I suppose no, you wouldn't know about a personal story, you wouldn't know anything, but I would hope that you'd be able to read some of the sensibility or some of the ideas of that from the image.
You know that poem by W.H. Auden? Cannot think what it's called at the moment, but it's like the little boy, there's a boy mowing or tilling the earth, and as it happens, it's the guy who made the little wings and they melt in the sun and he's falling out of the sky.
Icarus.
Icarus, that's it. Yeah. Do you know that poem by Auden?
I don't know the poem. Oh, I do. I do know it. Yes.
Because
you reminded me of it. I was thinking more of the Bruegel painting.
That's the poem. That's the poem about the
Bruegel painting. I think it is, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. But it's the same thing, isn't it? It's because it's about that magical, extraordinary disaster taking place in the sky. And then down in the ground, you've just got the little person going on with his everyday existence.
Absolutely. And that is that Bruegel painting. I think because in that one, you've just got the farmer sort of tilling the earth. And you can't see anything except a little leg just disappearing, a tiny splash in the distance. Exactly. Now, of course, that's all in the sort of space and structure of the work as well, which, of course, mine is really different. But I love that idea. I mean, that's exactly what I'm sort of talking to you about, I suppose, that there's this. I mean, Bruegel, actually, I did go in Vienna last year to see the Bruegel show,
Okay.
which was phenomenal.
Not bad.
And I absolutely loved it. But then as soon as I left the Bruegel show, there was the room of the Rubens as well.
Oh, wow.
Which was it's just, you know, it's the complete opposite. It's like so theatrical and huge, and I'm drawn to both, but I suppose the outcome is probably a little more Rubens than Bruegel.
So could we see the painting a bit closer? Would it be able to?
You can. Shall I just?
Yeah.
I'm not. We were talking about zeal. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Is that good?
Yeah, keep going. Go. How close can we get? Right up to the.
Oh, you can go right up close. Yeah. I don't quite know if I'm doing a good camera.
No, it's absolutely perfect because I can see there's much more there's much more layering of the paint in there, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah. That's quite interesting. So you've got now. It is. I mean, I do get quite a sort of, maybe that's wrong, sort of de Kooning, abstract expressionist vibe off it.
Yeah, I love de Kooning.
Yeah.
I wrote an article for Terps magazine actually about de Kooning as well, because is that okay? Should I put it down?
Yeah, put this down. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so that's the other influence I said, is that sort of the improvisation and the sort of unpredictability or the surprise that exists with abstract expressionism, as well as, I suppose, that sort of epic theatre of Baroque that I don't know, it just seems to be two things that I'm drawn to.
It's actually a really interesting way to describe abstract expressionism as surprise. I think that's quite interesting. And I remember they used to drink so much that they would do things they didn't plan. I thought it was one of their things.
Yes. Well, it is, I think, you know, I think particularly with de Kooning, and I think that, you know, there's this sort of call and response that exists to work, in that you put something down and then you've got to read it and decide almost what the next move is. There's a lot to do with sort of performative work that goes on in the moment with it.
Okay.
And I suppose that's the thing, I'm, you know, bridging something between process and picture making, which is quite difficult to negotiate sometimes, but it's the process of abstract expressionism that I'm really interested in as well. I have been for a long time. So
explain that a bit more, the process of abstract expressionism, like that.
I suppose that it's all in. It's much more to do. Oh, this is hard, isn't it? It's much more to do with how marks are made and how content comes from process.
Okay.
Rather than with picture making, I think kind of content's there, structured much more beforehand, and you're kind of then negotiating this thing. I mean, there's nothing. I think that exists in all painting, but it's just to what sort of extent you're using both of those things. But the process part of abstract, that's the surprise element, isn't it?
Yeah.
With de Kooning, I think it's the sort of battle to discover something as it's being made, rather than having a kind of, you're transcribing something from a drawing to a painting, and you know, and you're then working out these other things. But there's some grand structural improvisation that goes on with abstract expressionism that I quite like.
So do your paintings change quite dramatically as they go along?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do. Not some much more than others. I think with the series, because I've got sort of 3 on the go with this Fiat idea.
Okay.
And I mean, I can show you a little bit. They do start from drawings.
Okay.
But they really change as the painting develops, because there's change. You know, it's this idea of pentimenti, you know, that you can, artists changing their mind as the painting develops. It's taken to a bit of a ridiculous degree with me, because things can really move around. And in fact, it's really, sometimes it's hard to know when the end point is, you know.
I was wondering that. How can you possibly know? Yeah. Go on then.
I now give myself a test. I have to not do anything to it for 2 months.
2 months,
and then I'm
man.
pretty sure that it's done.
2 months isolation before they're allowed out.
Exactly. It's because I don't trust myself. Because I just, I think de Kooning actually said he just stops. He just said he doesn't finish anything. He just stops.
Well, it's funny how many times.
I kind of understand that as a.
It's funny how many times I keep mentioning this thing, but Picasso, I'm sure he said, never finish a painting, didn't he? And then some other painting tutor guy said to me, well, what he means is that if you stop working on it and leave it in the corner, you become to think it's finished.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that's a really important, and in a way, when I'm saying, 2 months, actually, I'm just giving myself a set of time to not do anything to it, to kind of allow it to live with it a little bit, because, I think that's a really difficult thing to understand. Maybe not for some. For me as a painter, is when something just it can go now. That's it. It exists now, I suppose.
It's odd, isn't it? Because I remember seeing a film of Howard Hodgkin painting, and he would paint something on, and then he would turn the canvas around instantly, so he couldn't see it. So that in a way you wouldn't fuss or fiddle with it, or
Yes. Yeah. Who was I reading about the other day? But it's sometimes, that the starting point would start. I'm trying to think who I was just reading about, but then it would be turned to the wall. Maybe it was Titian, actually.
All right.
Start and then turned to the wall for months, and then kind of brought back, and then a decision made about how to do it. So it's nothing new, isn't it? We think we're being radical. And we're not.
So go on. Can you show me like the earliest sort of drawing of a picture and take us on a journey through the painting?
You can, but the journey is not a set one.
No.
I do lots of little drawings as fragments from different sources, and then sometimes I do larger charcoal studies.
Okay.
And sometimes those can be before something, or they can be after something to work out the next step.
Okay.
And I think that most of the work starts from the little fragments of drawings that I do. I will attempt to do my camera work.
Let's have a look.
Today.
Oh wow!
Does that work?
Yeah. Can you go any closer?
I'm not very good at angles, am I?
Are those drawings?
Yeah, those are little drawings after. This lot are after a Rubens painting.
Okay, they're really nice drawings.
Really strict rules to them, in that they can only. They're an hour long, because sometimes I do drawings early in the morning from maybe 6:30 to 7:30.
Okay.
And I select one image for the week, and then I do a series of 5 or 6 drawings of the fragments of them.
Cool.
But I pick my pencil up at 6:30 and put it down at 7:30.
Okay.
It's really straight, and then that's it.
Okay.
So that they're just allowed to float around as things before I'm kind of imposing what they're, and largely I'm just looking at, with Rubens in particular. I'd like to take the credit for these drawings, but it is actually Rubens.
yeah. But you draw them very nicely.
The contour of them and the spaces, the in-between spaces with Rubens are just so amazing. I think that's what I like with Baroque work. It's incredibly complex.
Yeah.
And they just got all the best spaces. The working out of the space and the structures is amazing. And then these are some charcoal drawings, which
they're really nice.
That I may kind of then work up to as well.
Okay. They're really, really nice. I like the one on the top right-hand corner up here, this one. Oh, I'm pointing at something you can't see me pointing.
That's the most recent one.
Yeah.
Now, that's actually in response to a painting.
Yeah.
That is... This one on the bottom here, it's not finished yet.
Okay.
And so midway, I've kind of done a drawing to then think about this painting in a different way.
So it's quite interesting. You spend quite a long time thinking about what you're going to do next. You don't just turn up and go mad.
No, I don't. There's a lot of in-between thinking. But what I do is then I'll work for sort of 5 or 6 hours painting, which is quite intuitive. And I leave all this behind because I think that sort of degree of working out almost has to just become intuitive when you're actually painting.
Well,
and then I'm responding to the thing in front of me and trying to balance things out or break things up or lose things or bring things back into focus.
So you actually do all that work, think about what you might do, but then you don't necessarily look at it as you then use it on the painting.
No. It's not kind of brought from there to there, but bits of it will, but then the jump from a drawing to a painting is so huge. You can't, it has to adapt, it has to evolve its own thing. So the painting, the drawings work out so much. I could maybe work out some interesting structures, marks, or tonal relationships. Yeah. As soon as you introduce colour, that's a whole. It's got to work itself out.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting actually because a lot of people don't like him, but I've always been quite interested in Patrick Harran, or fascinated by him. And those big abstract sort of things he did. He'd do tiny little drawings, and then he'd do drawing after drawing after drawing after drawing of the shapes he'd use. And then when he found one he'd like, he would use that to do the big painting, but he wouldn't sit there copying it. He would then just go up to the canvas and just scribble it out without thinking. Yeah. So in the same way, it's almost like you're building up a sort of, how do you describe it? A sort of, not like a nerve, but you're building up this sort of response, and then you're allowing it to come out of you. You're sort of letting it go after a while.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it, building up a response. So it's a bit like, because I talked a little about, I like to do dancing as well, not as, just as an enjoyment thing. Yeah. Not as a profession, but it's rehearsals. Oh, I see what you you're working out your sort of thing. So I might be working out rhythms, I might be working out choreography, but then there's a thing that you bring to the actual painting, which is its own,
So
it's its own performance.
So its own performance in the painting. Interesting. So do you think the abstract expressionists work like that, or do you think they just went mad when they felt like it?
Oh no, I don't think there's any madness in it. I just think it's heavily, not literal madness, but I don't think it's kind of whatever. I think they just weighted their work on the side of intuition and surprise rather than planning and structure. But the planning and structure is all in there. I mean, the Krasner show last year was fantastic. I thought that was amazing.
I didn't see that
show. And you can just see, I think it's relying on years of experience and years of decision making and understanding and knowing all the sort of visual elements that you're using, that you then bring to a kind of certain amount of time to work with the painting. But I think they are heavily weighted on that part of the process rather than the things that I do. I think, I do a little bit more, there's more consciousness about picture making and I suppose references and of course narrative, which is why I love de Kooning, because I don't think he allowed some readings in the work that was that I enjoy, and they're incredibly exciting paintings, but but you get little glimpses of the world in de Kooning as well, which I like.
I remember seeing a fantastic, quite small one in Venice at that Guggenheim Museum, because they're normally very, very big, but it was only about like this size, and it was really good. I love small abstract paintings. I think they're quite fascinating. But there's a lovely little either drawing or print behind you underneath the picture. bottom middle. Yeah, can we have a look at that one?
Yeah, that's from a whole other. That's a monoprint. So the only printmaking I do, it's nothing technical. it's very painterly printmaking, which is just sort of monoprints, but which again might help me work something out in a painting that's just that's come up that I haven't thought about.
Okay.
But this little one here is a series of work that I called sort of Dreamweavers.
Okay.
I've got a couple of them left. There's about 5 or 6 quite large works.
Okay.
That made reference to a painting by Velazquez called The Spinners or Las Hilanderas.
Okay.
And that's a direct little monoprint from the Velazquez. It's in the Prado. It's one of my favourite ever paintings.
Oh, cool. Can we have a look? Can we have a close look? Can we have a close look at it?
At the print?
Yeah.
I think I'll bring it up to you.
Yeah, bring it on. Oh, that's really cool. Oh, that's very cool. I like that.
The painting is bigger than this print.
Yeah.
This print is the size of the original one that Velazquez did, but I think about 5 years afterwards, after Velazquez died, they added a couple of extra panels.
Okay.
On the painting.
Okay.
And so that changed. But that again, that makes reference to Ovidian myth in the Velazquez age. It's Arachne and Minerva. And it's all about artistic hubris.
Oh, I love a bit of that, yeah.
Arachne gets punished for wanting to compete with the gods with her artwork.
Now, where have I heard that before? But that's a brilliant story, isn't it? Brilliant story.
It's a fantastic story. And there's layers of it in The Spinners because Velazquez makes reference to it's women spinning and carding, and in the foreground they look like just women working, and in the background he's depicted a tapestry with this myth, this Ovidian myth on there. So and there's a lot in there about painting and craft as well, a sort of conversation about the competing values of craft and painting.
That's really, really interesting, actually. What was the name of the painting again?
It's called The Spinners.
The Spinners.
It was one after Las Meninas.
Oh, it's the one after that?
So it's lesser known, obviously, than Las Meninas, but it's one of the most exquisite paintings. Because Velazquez is painting sort of bits of thread, you can just see them, it's skimming over the surface. And
that is so cool. And but also the Spinners is quite close. So the tapestry is the thing that's trying to compete with the gods, is it?
Well, Arachne is amazing at weaving, and she claims her brilliance as her own. But Minerva is the god. One of her sort of functions is to be the god of weaving, and so the fact that Arachne doesn't acknowledge her annoys her first. And then Arachne decides to say, well, let her compete with me then. Big mistake.
Oh, man. And what happens?
Then she really annoyed Minerva, even though her tapestry was probably better. But, can't really get away with that.
No, they're such good stories, aren't they?
Yeah, they are great stories. I think they're just, the reason is they lend themselves so well to a painterly process of embedding things in and allowing things to unravel and get embedded into the surface. And the way that Ovid describes all this, there's a sort of in and out and a return and a poetic, but they're just so visual. I know they can sound a bit highfalutin when you're just kind of quoting kind of classical stories, but that's not the point of it. The point of it is they're just really interesting. And
I love the way the way you talk about the weaving in the picture with the in and out and the back and forth. It actually sounds like the process of painting.
Yeah, it is. That's why I was really sort of interested in it. And for quite a long time, because I'm not that young anymore, so I have been painting for a while. And in previous sort of lives, the canvas and the weave was really important
to me
that I made. So I would, sometimes, in the sort of mid-90s, I was very interested in this sort of post-minimalism moment where it was more to do with truth to materials. So I made a lot of paintings about unthreading and using thread on the surface. And actually that's returned, because this Venus one beside me, these marks here, I might show
can you show us that one?
Sorry, am I talking too much?
No, keep going. Let's have a look at this one.
I sand back paintings as well.
Okay.
So this one has been sanded, and I've deliberately been quite brutal and damaged it, because this is part of what the meaning of this is. It's meant to be about this kind of both sort of sensuous but kind of cloying, menacing sort of image as well. But this, I've used a sander. And put thread underneath. So this is like the imprint of the thread.
How bizarre.
That comes through the surface.
Well, like an industrial sander.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And what's it on canvas?
It's not that powerful, but it is a kind of electric sander.
And you couldn't just show us...
a lot. I've used the thread on the surface. I don't know if you can see
right,
that.
I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
so I used to drop the thread on the surface. So this whole Velazquez craft painting, threading painting is kind of, it's been in there for quite a long time.
Very cool. Very cool. And I'm just desperate to know what's page is open on that book that's down there.
This is actually my Rubens book, and I haven't got it at a Rubens, but this Sleeping Danny, and I was just looking at the amount of red one can put in a painting.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah. That's really cool.
And this one I've put, it's not balanced yet, but I've gone in with red.
You've gone with red.
Quite a lot with this, and so I'm thinking about that. But actually, the one that's mainly influenced with me, I don't know if I've got it here, is The Worship of Venus. Is the one I'm mainly. I don't know if you can
wow, yeah, we can see that. That's cool. That's a really cool picture.
So there's a lot of images.
There's a lot of stuff in that one.
Yeah.
So just take us a bit more around the studio while we're at it. Can we see your palette?
Hello.
Can we see your palette and all those things?
Oh, palettes. Oh, well, my palettes are down here.
Oh, very nice. What's that? A massive bit of glass? Or?
So I've got, this is for my small bits.
Okay.
And then I mix up, these are Wagamama. It's not the only kind of...
That's a really good idea. Yeah.
But I mix up larger quantities in here.
Okay.
And then I've got lots of bits of wood as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't have sort of one. I have several things on the go.
Yeah, no, exactly. And what are and those are Michael Harding paints down there by the look of it, are they?
Mainly Old Holland.
Oh, Old Holland. Okay.
For the colours I really specifically want. Should I have a look? Say. Yeah. I use Old Holland for Capimortem.
Okay.
And Venetian red.
Okay, Venetian red. Yeah.
A lot. My whites, because I use quite a lot of those. It might be Lucas or.
Okay.
I'm not. It's more just for. I'm not wedded to one particular brand. It's just which colour works for me.
Works for you. Yeah.
And with the ones I'm using, so Windsor and Newton. I'm sorry, I'm not showing you.
That's cool.
It might be Windsor and Newton for.
Okay. And what?
And things as well, and different qualities. So for very particular colours, I'll use expensive ones. But I'm quite small. But for those earths and that, I just travel around quality. Yeah. But I also use a lot of mediums. I make a glaze medium because there's a lot of glazes that go in.
Okay. What do you use for your glazes?
I mix linseed oil, some Damar varnish, not a stand oil, Damar, turpentine. And I sometimes put some cobalt dryers in for those that I need to dry.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would do as well.
I need layers to dry. I know de Kooning wanted layers wet as possible for as long as possible. But
Really?
because I kind of do a glazing thing, I kind of, yeah. I have to wait between drying.
Yeah, no, I put the cobalt dryer in as well because it just want to get on with it.
Yeah.
So go on, show us. Are there any more pictures you'd like to show us before we sort of...
Well, that top one, so that was one from the Spinners that I talked about.
Oh, I see. That's from the Spinners. Very cool.
And this one's, what's that one called? The Fates. I think. I titled. God, I'm so sorry. I've forgotten the name. It's not Dreamweaves. Oh, it's called The Sparing Ones.
Okay, nice title.
Because that makes reference to the Fates. That whole thing of weaving, that they measure the thread of your life and they cut it.
It's quite.
And this bottom one here is another Fiat one.
Yeah, I can see. He's got a similar vibe. They've all got these lines through them as well. Do you feel like those are like the lines of the spinning, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like drawing into painting, I think, for me. Because I do lots of drawings. So sometimes I use the brush as kind of, rhythmic or plain areas. But then I'll come in and be drawing with the brush as well. But yeah, that the very thin is, I suppose, it's not about thread. It's just that you develop a language, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
From what you've done historically. So I suppose they are thread-like marks. Yeah.
They're really cool. Yeah, go on, show us anything else that's
that big green one behind is another Venus one that I've been working on.
Nice.
So that's quite a good one too.
Quite wild. Fantastic. So yeah.
It's a bit overwhelming in here.
No, it's really good. It's really good fun. It's really good fun. So I'm just curious because do you think because I'm like sort of into abstract painting, but it's a bit like, do you think something about the time we're painting in that we have all these big iconic artists from the past like de Kooning or Rothko, do you think that makes it terribly hard for us to paint? Because in a way you felt they just kind of did what they wanted, but we seem to be constantly constricted or dealing with their past the whole time. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're riddled with a sort of self-consciousness, aren't we, as painters? We're overly aware of what's become before us, possibly. But then maybe that was always the case. I mean, I think there were huge pressures that, maybe to sort of break a mould or create new ground. But I think it's always been a synthesis of what's before and to try and find some resonance with now, what's now's language. And I suppose I know there's been the whole painting, and our thing is, particularly I think with the digital image, we're trying to find a reason to paint, possibly. I think that's a really easy one for me.
No, I agree totally.
But I think it's always been a synthesis. But I particularly like the Baroque because it is such a varied, we can call it a movement, it's just a kind of section of time where so many different types of work is going on.
Exactly.
You have this huge sort of theatrical quality to something like Rubens, and then you also have very modest sort of Northern European painting going on. So I think it's a time where you feel like everything's up in the air, and you can, in terms of, we're looking back historically, it's not for the people at the time, but looking back historically, it looks like a very varied movement with lots of different experiments going on.
Yeah.
And I like that. And I think possibly the same is true with early abstraction in particular, with early modernism. It was all about transforming painting, and I'm not really very involved in the sort of entropic thing of painting, or that it's just all come to an end. I just don't think that way.
No, I don't agree with that either. It's all like, I mean, like you said, I don't think you don't need a reason to sort of defend painting, really, do you?
No, but I do think you've got to. I think it's a good question of why now? Why be doing it now? I think there are valid kind of propositions to make to people with what you're doing with your work, and why you think it could be relevant in some sort of modest way to a visual language now.
Yeah, interesting. No, I'm not. No, I've absolutely loved chatting. I think I could go on hours actually because I'm fascinated. But I think we better stop. But it sounds stupid, but I cannot resist reading that W.H. Auden poem before we go, which I've just dug up.
Oh, do it!
So are you ready for it? So it's Musée des Beaux-Arts by W.H. Auden. About suffering, they were never wrong. The old masters, how well they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window, or just walking dully along. How, when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there always must be children who did not specially want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of a wood. They never forget that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course. Anyhow, in a corner, some untidy spot where the dogs go on with their doggy life and the torturer's horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The ploughman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him it was not an important failure. The sun shone as it had on the white legs disappearing into the green water, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to go, to get to, and sailed calmly on.
Well done. What a lovely Thank you. It's a real treat.
Right, anyway, I hope that adds a little bit of the vibe in your paintings. And I've loved looking at them. They're really, really cool.
Thanks, Rob. Lovely to speak.
Lovely to speak to you. Sure. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bumbuckler.